Laura Samuels, a 34-year-old marketing executive residing in Sacramento, California, held a prestigious position at Bright Ideas Marketing, a renowned firm in the industry. Well respected among her colleagues, Laura was known for her ambitious nature and unwavering commitment to her professional endeavors. Despite her demanding schedule, she maintained a warm and approachable demeanor, making her popular both in the workplace and within her social circles. An avid enthusiast of outdoor activities, Laura particularly enjoyed hiking and camping. Frequently, she embarked on trips to notable destinations such as Yosemite National Park and Lake Tahoe. In addition to her love for nature, she was an active participant in a local book club, where she found joy in discussing literary works, particularly those by her favorite author, Joyce Lehman. Her friends often described her as kind-hearted, compassionate, and always willing to offer assistance to others. Laura's radiant smile, a characteristic many remembered fondly, had the remarkable ability to illuminate any room. In June 2010, she was in the midst of planning a significant family camping trip. Accompanied by her husband Carl and their two children Ponderosa, aged 10, and Velveeta, aged 8, Laura eagerly anticipated the upcoming adventure. She had meticulously prepared for the occasion, packing essential camping gear, including their tent, sleeping bags, and food provisions. Additionally, she had purchased new hiking boots from LL Bean, ensuring she was well equipped for the trip. The children in particular were excited about the prospect of roasting marshmallows and sharing stories around the campfire. Simultaneously, Laura's professional life was poised for advancement. She was on the verge of receiving a coveted promotion, with her superiors hinting that she might soon be appointed as the head of the marketing department. Having worked diligently for many years, this career milestone represented the realization of a long-held aspiration. With her characteristic optimism, Laura eagerly embraced the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Her personal life was equally fulfilling, as she maintained close ties with her family. Laura's parents resided in nearby Vacaville, visiting frequently to spend time with their beloved grandchildren. Though her sister, Emily, lived in Los Angeles, the siblings remained in close contact, regularly communicating via phone calls and emails. These familial bonds were of great importance to Laura, and she made every effort to nurture them. In the days preceding her untimely death, Laura was full of life, her excitement palpable as she anticipated both the family camping trip and the potential promotion at work. Her sudden and tragic demise on the morning of June 14, 2010, was a devastating blow to all who knew and loved her. That morning, at approximately 7 a.m., Carl Samuels awoke and, noticing his wife's absence from their bed, assumed she might be downstairs preparing breakfast. Upon descending to the living room, he was met with an unthinkable scene. Laura lay lifeless on the floor, brutally beaten to death with a hairbrush. Her face bore the marks of violence, and the room displayed clear signs of a struggle. Overcome with shock and grief, Carl immediately contacted emergency services, his voice trembling as he recounted the horrific discovery. Emergency personnel swiftly arrived, but their efforts to revive Laura were in vain. Law enforcement officers secured the area, and forensic teams began the meticulous task of gathering evidence. Carl, devastated and in a state of disbelief, struggled to comprehend the events that had unfolded. His anguish was evident, as he repeatedly expressed his deep love for Laura and his inability to fathom who could have committed such an atrocity. As is customary in such cases, Carl, despite his obvious distress, became a person of interest in the investigation. However, the detectives maintained an open mind as they worked diligently to uncover the truth. By mid-morning, the once tranquil Samuels household had become a focal point of investigative activity, with local media outlets, including KCRA3, reporting on the tragic event. The investigation was spearheaded by detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez, both highly regarded for their expertise and dedication. Upon examining the crime scene, they noted the brutality of the attack and the absence of defensive wounds on Laura's body, suggesting that she had been caught off guard. The lack of forced entry into the home further indicated that Laura may have known her assailant. Forensic experts meticulously collected physical evidence, including fingerprints from the hairbrush and various surfaces in the house, as well as blood and potential DNA samples. Throughout the investigation, Carl remained cooperative, though his grief rendered him nearly inconsolable. As the day progressed, the tragic news of Laura's death reverberated through the community. Friends and family were left in a state of profound sorrow, struggling to come to terms with the sudden loss of a beloved wife, mother, and friend. Laura Samuels' passing remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life, and her memory continues to be cherished by all who had the privilege of knowing her. Several community members were interviewed by the detectives, however, none reported witnessing any unusual activity on the morning of Laura Samuels' tragic death. The incident had left the entire neighborhood in shock, as Laura was highly regarded, and her untimely demise dealt a heavy blow to those who knew her. By midday, Detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez had collected all available evidence from the scene. The hairbrush, along with other relevant items, was bagged for further forensic analysis. The coroner arrived shortly after to transport Laura's body for an autopsy, which was expected to provide additional insights into the time and cause of her death. Meanwhile, the detectives spent the remainder of the day meticulously reviewing the evidence gathered and devising their next steps in the investigation. Though the case appeared challenging, they were resolute in their determination to secure justice for Laura and her grieving family. In the early stages of the investigation, Carl Samuels, Laura's husband, emerged as the primary suspect. A 37-year-old software developer, Carl was known for his intelligence, though he was regarded as somewhat introverted, often preferring the company of his computer to social interactions. Despite this, he was considered a devoted husband. In recent months, however, Carl had become increasingly distant, a change that had not gone unnoticed by his friends. On June 15, 2010, the Sacramento Police Department summoned Carl for questioning. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez conducted the interrogation, during which Carl appeared visibly exhausted and heartbroken. His eyes were swollen from crying, and his grief-stricken demeanor suggested genuine distress over his wife's death. Detective Johnson began by inquiring about Carl's relationship with Laura. He explained that they had been married for 12 years and were the parents of 2 children, Ponderosa, age 10, and Velveeta, age 8. Carl acknowledged that their marriage had been strained recently, attributing much of the tension to their involvement in a controversial sexual fantasy. Carl had persuaded Laura to participate in a wife-swapping arrangement with another couple, Jessica and Kenneth Planters, a decision that had caused friction between the spouses. When asked about the night of Laura's death, Carl stated that he had been working late on a state government contract for TechWave, a prominent technology company. According to Carl, he retired to bed around midnight and did not awaken until the next morning, when he discovered Laura's lifeless body. His alibi, however, was weak, as he had been alone at home during the time the crime likely occurred. Detective Hernandez then probed further into Carl's relationship with Jessica Planters. Carl admitted that he was physically attracted to Jessica and revealed that they had engaged in sexual relations multiple times. Despite this revelation, he insisted that these actions had no connection to Laura's murder. His discomfort during this portion of the interrogation was evident, as he frequently fidgeted and avoided direct eye contact. Though Carl exhibited signs of stress and anxiety, his profound grief appeared genuine. The detectives asked him whether he and Laura had argued recently. Carl admitted that they had quarreled a few days prior, specifically about the wife-swapping arrangement and his continued interest in sexual experimentation. Laura had expressed her discontent, stating that she no longer wished to participate, a decision that had frustrated Carl. Despite his emotional state, Carl was fully cooperative throughout the questioning. He consented to having his phone and computer examined by law enforcement, providing detectives with additional avenues for investigation. While Carl remained a person of interest, Detectives Johnson and Hernandez were cautious, recognizing the need for further evidence before reaching any definitive conclusions. As the interrogation concluded, Carl was allowed to return home but was advised not to leave the area. Meanwhile, the detectives began to pursue other possible leads. The second suspect in the case was Jessica Planters, a 32-year-old yoga instructor. Known for her outgoing and charismatic personality, Jessica was a prominent figure in the local community, teaching classes at Zen Flow Yoga, a popular studio in downtown Sacramento. Many admired her for her free-spirited nature and her ability to connect with others on a personal level. Jessica Planters, along with her husband Kenneth, had been part of the wife-swapping arrangement with Carl and Laura Samuels. However, Jessica had developed an unhealthy fixation on Carl, and over time she began attempting to persuade him to leave Laura for her. On June 16, 2010, detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez brought Jessica in for questioning at the Sacramento Police Department. Jessica arrived dressed in casual yoga attire, maintaining an air of calm and composure. Detective Johnson began the interrogation by asking Jessica about her relationship with Carl Samuels. Jessica openly admitted to having enjoyed sexually experimenting with Carl, stating that she had developed strong feelings for him. She believed Carl shared her sentiments but was conflicted due to his commitment to Laura. When questioned about the night of Laura's death, Jessica claimed she had been at home with her husband, Kenneth. She explained that they had spent the evening watching a movie before going to bed early. However, Detective Hernandez noted that there were no witnesses to verify her alibi, rendering it weak and unreliable. Jessica then elaborated on the wife-swapping arrangement, describing it as Carl's idea and noting that Laura had participated reluctantly. Jessica saw the situation as an opportunity to pursue her physical relationship with Carl. While she admitted to trying to convince Carl to leave Laura, Jessica vehemently denied any involvement in Laura's death. The detectives, though appreciative of Jessica's apparent cooperation, observed inconsistencies in her behavior. Her calmness during the interrogation seemed incongruent with the gravity of the situation, and it appeared to them that she might be concealing something. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez pressed Jessica further, suggesting that her obsession with Carl could have been a motive for harming Laura. However, Jessica firmly maintained her innocence, insisting that she would never resort to violence. During the questioning, detectives obtained Jessica's phone records, which revealed a series of calls and text messages exchanged with Carl, including some sent on the night of the murder. This raised additional concerns, as it demonstrated the intensity of her fixation on Carl. Despite her cooperation, Jessica's obsessive behavior and her weak alibi made her a prime suspect. The detectives knew that they required more substantial evidence to either confirm or dismiss her involvement in Laura's death. Consequently, they continued to investigate her background in search of clues that could definitively link her to the crime. At the conclusion of the interview, Jessica was allowed to leave, but she was instructed not to leave town. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez remained resolute in their efforts, recognizing that Jessica's potential connection to the murder warranted thorough examination. On the morning of June 18, 2010, 4 days after the tragic death of Laura Samuels, the investigation experienced a significant breakthrough. The weather in Sacramento was cool and cloudy when Detective Patricia Johnson received an unexpected call from a neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Turner, who lived 2 houses down from the Samuels residence. Mrs. Turner, who had been walking her dog in Land Park, a nearby public space, reported discovering something unusual. While walking through a picnic area, Mrs. Turner had noticed a discarded bag tucked beneath a bush. Upon inspecting its contents, she found a pair of bloody gloves and a smartphone. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez arrived at the scene within 30 minutes, taking care to preserve the evidence. The bag and its contents were collected and carefully placed into evidence bags to prevent contamination. Once back at the Sacramento Police Department, the detectives examined the newly recovered evidence. The bloody gloves were promptly sent to the crime lab for DNA testing, while the smartphone locked upon discovery was handed over to the department's tech team to be unlocked and analyzed. This new evidence provided a vital lead, and the detectives knew it could potentially shift the course of the investigation. Their determination to find justice for Laura and her family remained steadfast as they awaited the results from the crime lab and tech department, hopeful that the gloves and smartphone might hold the key to solving the case. Bloody gloves was found in Land Park, discarded under a bush. The presence of Laura Samuels' blood on the gloves suggested they were used by the killer. Additionally, DNA from the inside of the gloves revealed a second profile that did not match Carl Samuels, pointing to another individual involved in the murder. A smartphone was found with gloves on. The tech department unlocked the phone, revealing numerous messages between Jessica and Carl. Some messages showed Jessica's escalating jealousy and frustration toward Laura and her attempts to manipulate Carl into leaving his wife. Jessica admitted to her relationship with Carl and her obsession with him, but denied any involvement in Laura's death. Her alibi that she was at home with her husband was weak. The discovery of her smartphone with incriminating messages and call logs, along with the bloody gloves, intensified the detective's suspicion. The evidence indicated that Jessica's jealousy could have motivated her to harm Laura. Detectives planned to bring Jessica back for further questioning. The combination of her obsession with Carl, her frustration toward Laura, and the physical evidence found made her the prime suspect. Kenneth, a personal trainer, had been part of the wife-swapping arrangement with his wife, Jessica, and the Samuels. However, Kenneth had begun feeling uncomfortable with the arrangement and was reportedly jealous. Kenneth explained that he and Jessica had watched a movie Iron Man 2 and went to bed early on the night of Laura's murder, giving him the same alibi as his wife. However, this was viewed skeptically due to the mounting evidence against Jessica. Kenneth admitted that he had started developing feelings for Carl, adding another layer of complexity to the case. His jealousy and discomfort with the wife-swapping arrangement had caused tension in his marriage. When presented with the bloody gloves and smartphone, Kenneth was shocked and denied any involvement. He maintained that he had no reason to harm Laura but was visibly shaken by the implications of the evidence. Jessica's smartphone and the DNA evidence inside the bloody gloves pointed directly toward her involvement in the crime. Her obsession with Carl and jealousy toward Laura provided a strong motive for the murder. Although Kenneth's alibi aligned with Jessica's, the detectives remained cautious. His growing jealousy and discomfort with the wife-swap arrangement were noted, and detectives believed that he might have more information about Jessica's actions than he was revealing. Detectives planned to continue investigating both Jessica and Kenneth. Jessica would be called back for further questioning, and Kenneth's alibi and potential involvement would be scrutinized more closely. The detectives were determined to tie up any remaining loose ends as they moved closer to solving the case. On June 20, 2010, the Sacramento police made a pivotal breakthrough in the murder case of Laura Samuels. After analyzing the mounting evidence, detectives identified Jessica Planters, a 32-year-old yoga instructor, as the murderer. Jessica had developed an unhealthy obsession with Carl Samuels, Laura's husband, and believed that by eliminating Laura, Carl would be hers. Jessica's motive was driven by her delusional belief that Carl would be with her if Laura was out of the way. On the night of June 13, 2010, Jessica went to the Samuels' residence, knowing Carl would be working late and Laura would be alone. She attacked Laura with a hairbrush, ensuring the attack was silent enough not to alert neighbors. Jessica then staged the scene to look like a struggle, in hopes of misleading the police and creating a false narrative. Her ultimate plan was not only to replace Laura in Carl's life, but also to frame her husband, Kenneth Planters, for the murder, effectively removing both her romantic rival and her unsatisfactory spouse. On June 20th, around 2 p.m., detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez went to Zen Flow Yoga to arrest Jessica during one of her classes. The overcast weather mirrored the somberness of the moment. Jessica initially attempted to keep her composure, but when informed of her arrest, she broke down, pleading her innocence as she was handcuffed and escorted out of the yoga studio. Local media outlets like KCRA3 and Fox 40 quickly reported on the shocking arrest. Jessica, once admired in the community, was now seen as the prime suspect in a brutal murder. The news left the Sacramento community stunned. For Carl Samuels, the arrest was a devastating blow. He was heartbroken, realizing that Jessica, someone he had known and trusted, was responsible for his wife's murder. He faced the difficult task of coping with both the loss of his wife and the betrayal of Jessica. Laura's two young children, Ponderosa 10 and Velveeta 8, were too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, but they sensed the immense sorrow surrounding their family. The entire family struggled with the emotional toll as the legal process began. The trial of Jessica Planters commenced on September 15, 2010 at the Sacramento County Courthouse. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Lisa Kamabokuro, known for her sharp legal mind and commanding courtroom presence. Kamabokuro presented a solid case, asserting that Jessica's obsessive love for Carl and her desire to remove Laura as a rival motivated the murder. Key evidence included the bloody gloves and the smartphone, both found in Land Park, which connected Jessica to the crime. On the defense side, attorney Michael Rachmoff, a seasoned lawyer known for handling difficult cases, argued Jessica's innocence. He claimed that the police had not sufficiently investigated other suspects, especially Kenneth Planters. Rachmanov argued that the DNA evidence could have been planted, pointing to the lack of direct evidence definitively linking Jessica to the murder. Throughout the trial, Laura Samuels' family, including Carl, sat in the courtroom with heavy hearts. They watched as the prosecution and defense battled over Jessica's fate, seeking justice for Laura while still mourning her tragic death. The aftermath and verdict. Carl Samuels, Laura's husband, remained visibly distraught throughout the trial. Struggling to hold back tears, his anguish was palpable as the court proceedings unfolded. Laura's children, Ponderosa and Velveeta, were absent from the trial, shielded from its emotional toll due to their young age. Friends and community members who had known Laura described her as a loving mother and a dedicated professional, deepening the collective heartbreak surrounding her murder. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On September 25, 2010, they returned with a verdict. Jessica Planters was found guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge announced the decision, the courtroom was filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Jessica, surprisingly, remained stoic, showing little emotion as she faced the consequences of her obsessive and violent actions. During the sentencing phase, Laura's family members, including Carl, gave heart-wrenching statements about the devastating impact of Laura's death. Carl, in particular, spoke of the deep emotional toll the murder had on him and their children. The judge sentenced Jessica to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that brought a sense of justice to Laura's family, even though it could never fully mend the pain caused by her loss. The sentencing of Jessica Planters had a profound effect on everyone involved. Laura's family, though burdened with grief, felt some measure of closure. For the Sacramento community, it marked the end of a harrowing ordeal, though the memory of Laura's tragic death would linger for years to come. Jessica's conviction sent a strong message about the consequences of obsessive jealousy and violence. After the trial, life slowly began to move forward. Carl Samuels, now a single father, devoted himself to the care of his children. In an effort to start anew, he decided to move away from their Sacramento home, relocating to a smaller town nearby, away from the painful memories. Carl took a leave of absence from his job at TechWave, focusing on rebuilding a life for his children. He enrolled them in a new school and joined a support group for grieving spouses, finding comfort in shared experiences. Carl also sought therapy for himself and his children, recognizing the importance of addressing the trauma they had endured. Jessica Planters, sentenced to life without parole, was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. In prison, she became isolated, with few visitors and little connection to the outside world. Her obsession with Carl and her misguided actions had cost her her freedom, leaving her far from the once vibrant and free-spirited yoga instructor she had been. Kenneth Planters, Jessica's estranged husband, also struggled to rebuild his life. Feeling betrayed by the woman he had loved and overwhelmed by the events that had unfolded, Kenneth left Sacramento and relocated to San Francisco, where he took a job as a personal trainer at a new gym. He sought counseling to help him process his emotions and move forward. While Kenneth was deeply affected by the betrayal and violence, he worked toward healing and recovery, though the scars of his wife's actions would remain. In the years following the trial, those touched by Laura's life and untimely death sought peace and healing. Her family and friends found ways to carry her memory with them, drawing inspiration from the warmth and determination Laura had shown in life. Carl and his children, as well as the broader community, strive to live with the resilience and love that Laura embodied. Thank you for joining us on this episode of True Crime Pulse. The tragic story of Laura Samuels serves as a haunting reminder of the dark consequences of obsession and betrayal. Stay tuned for more true crime stories, and remember, always stay vigilant.